Good afternoon to you all. I'm very excited about the conversation that we have today as the next in our series, our Freedom Requires Action webinar series, where we really look to explore what is it from a policy perspective, where is the direction that we need to be going in the fight to eradicate human trafficking. I encourage you all to introduce yourselves in the chat, make connections as you so see fit, as this is always a great opportunity to be able to network. But before we begin, I do want to recognize today is a day that is important to all of us in the United States, and I would ask that we just take a moment of silence to honor and remember those that lost their lives on 9/11 many years ago, and those that subsequently have lost their lives as a result of it. So if you all please just join me in a moment of silence. Thank you for that. So as I mentioned, I am so excited about this conversation. I will be very upfront. I'm a little biased because just this year, I, along with one of our incredible panelists, released a book on the issue of collective impact and its role in eradicating human trafficking. So this is an issue that is very near and dear to my heart, as I truly believe, having been in this fight for almost 2 decades now, that really the way that we are going to be effective in eradicating it is through collective impact. And we're going to be able to hear from some great panelists today that are really working in this space, that are actualizing, executing collective impact approaches within their various different fields. And so I want to jump right in, and Brittany, I'm going to go to you first. Again, a little biased, since you were the co-author of Eradicating Human Trafficking, a transformative approach through collective impact. But I know that we've heard it really has been a significant contribution in a lot of different ways to the field, to really pull that information together in a collective, in that book itself. So could you kind of share with everyone here today some of the core thesis of the book and how it defines the concept of collective impact and the concept of really eradicating human trafficking?
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be with you all today. It really has been such a journey over the past few years, really exploring how we can come together as a field and even dream of the idea of eradication. It feels like just a few years ago, we were always talking about combating, and it really has been a season where we've seen this shift to people believing that eradication is possible. But in order for us to get there, we have to really lay down our egos and our logos and recognize where there's opportunities for each of us to really own our areas of responsibility in a real way, and then figure out what are those connection points within the field. And so what we seek to do through the book is really outline a collective impact model where we are recognizing all of the different aspects of the fight, everything from, our law enforcement who's critical and our prosecutors for prosecution to our survivor support agencies, and then of course that prevention piece. But some of the challenges that we address through it is also, where are we seeing those current breakdowns? Where are our limitations? How do we have to evolve the current solutions in the field to really reflect how we need to be moving together in order to see meaningful steps towards impact? And so through the book, we really want to highlight where we need to rely extremely heavily on the voices of our lived experience experts. They're the ones who should be informing our solutions. Their experiences are what allow us to really craft meaningful solutions. But alongside that is that we have to have the data. We have to be all using similar data models. We have to be collecting data in a similar way. We have to be transparent and open in our communication. And so our belief is that if we can get everybody moving in the same direction towards that common vision of eradication, then we really do have an opportunity to see all of us come together as a field to really address this problem in a unique way.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think it's just so important that, this concept. So, this is the first time that the book has, or that through the book that we've really taken the concept and laid out practical steps for those that are implementing. And there are several people that are really on the front lines. Our next panelist, Kirsty Muncie, currently serves as the president and CEO at the Collaborative to End Human Trafficking. And before that, she held the position of chief program officer at Cleveland Rape Center, where she developed innovative programs for survivors of rape, sexual abuse, and human trafficking for more than 15 years. She's really motivated by a vision of a world free of violence, taking pride in driving organizational transformation and multi-systemic collaboration. And Kirsty, I've known you for many years, and it's been just such a pleasure to watch the work that you all have been doing at the collective, or at the collaborative, sorry. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you've been applying some of those collective impact strategies on a regional scale, because you're working in essentially the greater Cleveland area.
Yes. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to this forum. Bill, you're right. We've connected very early on when I came on board here at the Collaborative to End Human Trafficking. And I'm so excited about the book that you and Brittany wrote. Thank you for those contributions, because what we do is really unique. I think it's incredibly innovative. I think that the issue of human trafficking that we're all tackling requires this work. I think we sort of shifted away from nice to have to must do, right? This is really the only way to eradicate and prevent human trafficking in the long run. So I think we all meet each other in that intersection on believing that, but executing it is challenging. And I think when I came on board here at the Collaborative to End Human Trafficking, I did not know what would be required of me to make that shift from an organization leader to a network leader, to a coalition leader, to a collaborative impact leader. I think it's really important to point out that collaboration and collective impact are two different things. Collaboration is part of collective impact, but collective impact is a much bigger thing. And what I learned and what I have learned the hard way and from our partners is that collective impact is really a mind shift, right? That we have to make away from, this is my organization, this is how I'm doing it, these are my resources. I may dabble in the group, but I'm going to come back to my place. And that's a huge shift, is to really think about the system that we're addressing, the system that is involved in anti-human trafficking work. So when I show up in the morning, right, I think about that network, that system in my community that addresses human trafficking, rather than my organization and what my organization does. I think we got very lucky here in Cuyahoga County and in the greater Cleveland area, because from the beginning of this organization, the organizers of the collaborative were very clear that a complex social issue like human trafficking cannot be solved by one organization or system. That is the foundation of everything we do. And very early on, we brought together community leaders who recognized, again, that only when our community locks arm can we do this work together. And I think from the beginning, since 2007, this is something that we have instilled. That's one of those strategies that we continue to use, right? We rely on the experts in our community to come to the table and help us address this very complex issue. So I think that's really important, right? And that's a strategy, collective impact strategy. We never go alone. We always bring the expert together from law enforcement, from our hospital systems, from our social service providers. We work with a lot of businesses as well who see the importance in the space, right? The hotel industry, the transportation industry. And so we listen to them, and we develop that common agenda together. What's important for our community, and that shifts, right? That has shifted for us since 2007, from we need to raise awareness and educate, to now how do we create better services? How do we create stronger collaboration and coordinated response systems? So that's what we're wrestling with on the ground. But I think that mindset shift that we really need to help people make is one of the most important things. of these strategies that we employ.
No, I really appreciate your comments. I think, the idea that it goes beyond just collaboration, right? Like collaboration is a part of collective impact, but it's so much more. And it really is, I'll be the one to say it. And that is that I think sometimes we get very territorial in this space. We don't want to share various resources, or we want to protect our data. We want to protect this, we want to protect that. And I think, it is kind of shifting our mind to understand this is a global problem, right? This is a massive, massive problem across the face of the earth today, and being able to really understand that not one of us can solve it on our own, right? We've got to be able to come together. And that kind of brings us to our next panelist. Hope Dockweiler is the policy officer for the Center on Human Trafficking Research and Outreach at the University of Georgia. In this role, she works to facilitate connections between centros, is that how you say, is that the acronym? Research and programming to effective policy measures on local, national, and regional levels within the context of their projects in West and Southern Africa, from a survivor-centered, trauma-informed, and social work-centered framework. And so, Hope, you really bring in that much larger, that global perspective. And I think, we heard from Brittany and Kirsty about some of the considerations that to implementation here in the United States at maybe a regional or even a national level. But could you talk a little bit about what are some of the strategies needed to adapt to various cultural and geopolitical contexts, right? We're very fortunate in the US that we have a lot of political will behind the fight, but we go other places, we may not see that just as much.
Yes, thank you, Bill. As he mentioned, I am part of the Center on Human Trafficking Research and Outreach, and the abbreviation, yes, is CENTRO. We love an acronym. And yeah, so we have kind of a unique perspective on collective impact as we are an inherently academic research-based group who is working internationally and across the globe. And so our team is very cross-disciplinary in nature, and we really have taken to heart that this is we all know trafficking is an extremely complex and multi-sector issue, and solutions have to be that way as well. As Bill stated, we are part of the University of Georgia, but we are specifically situated within the School of Social Work, and the social work frame or perspective is also inherently intertwined in our work and really gets at so many of the same core ideas as this collective impact approach. And so, for instance, one core social work theory that really impacts social work practice is called the ecological systems model or theory. And it's this idea that you have to understand the individual in relation to the multiple levels of systems and environments that are all impacting the individual simultaneously. And so we have this approach. We understand that trafficking is this multi-sectoral issue, and therefore our solutions need to have the same approach. And so one term that is very common, and I'm not sure if Kirsty mentioned it, but I believe her organization functions in the same way, is that within collective impact, there's this idea of backbone support organizations. So Centro has really worked to uphold this idea and to be that within our programs in West and Southern Africa. And what this looks like is, helping to guide the vision and strategy and set the agenda and provide support and capacity building to the organizations that we work with. And so, although we work in multiple countries, currently our projects are in Sierra Leone and Senegal in West Africa, and Zambia and Malawi in Southern Africa. The Southern Africa project is really just taking off, and the Senegal and Sierra Leone projects are a couple of years in. But within those, we implement a similar framework in each of them in terms of who we're trying to strategically connect with to address all the levels of influence that impact the individual who is either a victim to trafficking or is vulnerable to becoming a victim. And so with that, in each country that we work within, we have first a country coordinator who is on the ground, who is doing the work of being representative of our organization and our efforts there, who really keeps tabs on everything that is happening there and is able to be such a pivotal voice in all directions for our programming. Then we also, our work is really focused on research, as I stated, and we start all of our work with baseline prevalence studies, and then we conclude with inline studies, and the programming and policy efforts happen in between those two things. And so we partner with local researchers, local research institutions or universities or groups. And we want to do that because we really want to build capacity there as well. We want all of our work to have this lens of sustainability. Then we work with implementing partner organizations. These are organizations that are already on the ground, that are already invested in communities and are already doing the work. We want to strengthen them, and we want to provide tools through our work and with the data that our research provides to improve their services. So we work alongside organizations that already exist, which I think goes to the point that you were just mentioning as well, about the need for that collaboration and willingness to build one another up. Then from there, we also work with we have think tanks in all of our countries where we're working as well. So local experts that represent different areas of our work, policy, programming, and prevention efforts there. And then we work with governments, with the governments within the countries and the relevant government ministries who are responsible with addressing the issue. And we try to really build stakeholder relationships there. One example, getting back to your question of how we've had to adapt, I would say is, for instance, in Sierra Leone, one of our projects where we focused on child trafficking in particular in Sierra Leone, in addition to trying to build relationships with the central government, which has been really pivotal and really beneficial and has resulted in shifts in national policy there within the duration of the time of our programming, we also came to realize that we needed to emphasize also traditional forms of leadership. And so this came through, extensive relationship building and trying to understand and listen to what was happening on the ground and on a local level. We realized that targeting actually what is known as paramount chiefs, they are the local leaders who are the most trusted in communities, targeting them to bring awareness and education, to share our research findings, and to try to connect with them to create community awareness and to provide prevention efforts in that way has been a way we've had to adapt. It's something we didn't go into the project knowing that we, would need to connect or that level of influence was necessary. But it's one way that we've realized that we can be really successful. And through that, not only has there been a shift in national policy, we've also been able to influence community level bylaws too, that further the implementation of national policies on a very direct level.
No, that's awesome. I mean, the work that you all are doing is just incredible in really carrying this across, transnational borders. But I wanted to pick up, one of the things that you talked about was this backbone entity, right? And so in the book that Brittany and I wrote, we called it a central coordinating entity, right? So same sort of concept that really kind of helps tie these different organizations and entities together. Brittany, first, I have to apologize. I was so excited to jump into this topic, I forgot to even introduce you. And so please accept my apologies on that. Brittany Dunn is the COO and co-founder of the Safe House Project. She serves as a member of the Virginia Governor's Commission on Human Trafficking Prevention and Survivor Support. Prior to Safe House Project, she spent 10 years in international business development and has a BA from Wesley College, and graduated top of her class with an MBA from Thunderbird School of Global Management, and has been featured in Forbes, The Hill, CBN, and Missouri Physicians Magazine. She continues to train all across the country, groups including law enforcement, healthcare professionals, policymakers, and corporations on the issue of human trafficking. And Brittany, just as an expert in really helping to lead the Safe House Project, you're really working to kind of implement some of these collective impact strategies in its daily operations to kind of maybe step into that role of a central coordinating entity, particularly with regards to survivor care and ensuring that survivors have equitable access to quality care. Could you talk a little bit about that approach and some of the successes that you've seen by really being able to fill that role?
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, everything starts with the survivor. We want to keep the survivor at the center of every one of our solutions. And so our survivor support team will serve 1,500 survivors this year as they exit a trafficking situation and getting them into care, which is fantastic and we love it. But in addition to that, we also have the opportunity to use that information and the intelligence, honestly, that they're providing us through our survivor support team to really inform the field, specifically as we talk about restorative care, on what are the needs of the survivor community. And so by aggregating that data and analyzing it, we're able to do a lot of capacity building, as both Kirsty and Hope mentioned. Like, we have to build capacity in the field, especially around service provision. So we every year take that data and we really mine it to say, okay, where are those barriers that survivors are hitting as they're either exiting a trafficking situation, or maybe that's 5, 10, 15, 20 years into their healing journey. We really want to understand what are the things that are causing re-exploitation, and then help provide that data and information out to the field to help inform effective intervention, interdiction, and response tactics. And so that's just one of the ways that we really believe that we can help support the work of so many incredible organizations. In addition to that, we use that to really inform our funding cycle for grants. And so if we are hitting up continually against limitations of being able to place survivors into care who have severe mental health challenges, or maybe they're pregnant, or maybe they're exiting with multiple children, or have parole violations, all of those are very complex additional considerations outside of just the trauma of trafficking. So when we use that information to help guide which programs need to launch in which states, it informs our national landscape and our collective response. I think the other thing that we have been able to really do through that is come back behind that with an additional training that individuals need out there, whether that's our healthcare professionals, law enforcement, first responders. But it also goes a step further to really activating our communities. One of my favorite trainings that we've ever developed was in 2020 when the world was shut down, as we all know. But the pest management industry came to us and they said, hey, we really think we're in a unique position to help identify suspected trafficking in homes still, because we are the only business that's able to still go into homes. And they go into 20 to 30% of households on an annual basis. So their ability during a time when kids were trapped in unsafe situations to go in and spot signs of trafficking was instrumental to getting eyes on really hard situations. And so I really think, when I think through it all, I'm like, there's not a person in our communities that doesn't have a reason to lean into this issue and be part of the response. Of course, that is going to be measured by their role, their activities. But I think if we can put, a million eyes on this problem, then all of a sudden we have the information we need to really inform how we are responding. And so I think as we move forward as a field, it really requires that we have that central repository of data, not for the purpose of growing one entity, but because we all need that data. And so it needs to be transparent. It needs to be collected consistently, and then it needs to be pushed back out into the field in order to make sure that we are really crafting our solutions in a way that are effective to drive the needle towards eradication.
Yeah, I think, this concept makes perfect sense, right? It's common sense when we really look at the problem and we start to look at what is the solution. I think we can all pretty much agree, like, yes, this is the way that we need to go, right? And Brittany, you highlighted a lot of those reasons, particularly around like sharing data. That's such a huge gap in this space right now. I know, Hope, you're working on that, and on the global scale, but it sounds very good in concept, but there are inherently some challenges, right? And Kirsty, you started to mention some of those challenges early on, but I wonder if you could elaborate on that a little bit. What are some of the challenges that you faced in your regional efforts, and what are some of the strategies to help overcome those and align the different efforts to create cohesion?
Yeah, and I think that's a key question, and something we really need to wrestle with in this space and in this collective impact work, because at the end of the day, right, what it all comes back to is trust and relationships.
Mhm.
And it is really difficult to maintain that trust, to build that relationship. We are here in Cuyahoga County. Our coalition consists of 75 organizations. That is, when you break it down into people who participate in our coalition work, that is over 350 people that we interact with on all levels of organizational hierarchy, on all levels of government, nonprofit, businesses. So we need to be, as backbone staff, right? Like Addie said, like Hope said, as backbone organizations, as staff, we need to be really nimble. We need to be able to listen to the needs of our people. We need to get in when there's conflict between organizations, and we sort of need to help them sort it out. So we play all these different roles as backbone organizations. So I think that's one of the most important things. For me, I'm someone, again, my mind shift, I learn a lot in the space on how to operate. I'm one of those people, I'm like, there's a problem, let's fix it, right? No, not at all. We need to look at that problem from 5,000 different angles. We need to examine it. We need to make sure that that really is the problem. Again, I love what Hope says. I'm also a trained social worker, and I teach at the Case Western Reserve University School of Social Work as well. And I that model of how we approach people and systems, I think, is something we need to remind ourselves. We need to listen. We need to engage. We need to understand our community partners before we can jump into any conclusion on what changes. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead. No, please
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I think that's a very important. And so we roll that out right into our coalition model. We work in a working group style. We have people that come together to creatively and collectively solve problems that the coalition has decided are collective problems, and they offer solutions. And again, we're hearing the same thing, right? Data is important, reporting out, transparent communication, all of those things are really important and has helped us certainly very much in getting the community come together and make progress.
Yeah, I think so. We've talked a little bit about this ecosystem thinking, right? Like understanding the systems in which we're operating. And that really helps to identify, mitigate different challenges and risks associated with different things that we're taking on. And Hope, you're working in very different ecosystems, right? So you're in, Western and Southern Africa and African countries. Could you talk a little bit about what are some of the specific challenges you've encountered that we may not even be thinking about as we navigate stuff here in the US?
Yes, well, there's definitely, broad challenges that are probably very similar to a lot of the things that, Brittany and Kirsty and others on this call encounter in their work domestically to eradicate human trafficking, which would be, as Kirsty even just said, a huge one, timelines and relationships, and being able to have the time and attention and care it takes to build relationships with all partners, not just service providers, but also on all levels of our engagement, having those relationships be something where communication can be clear and open and back and forth. That's especially, complicated as well when you're not only trying to build relationships with another individual, but there's factors of extreme cultural differences and even language differences as well. So communicating clearly, building those relationships are definitely challenges, as well as then kind of on a larger macro level, creating or instilling the understanding of human trafficking as a priority area of interest. How do we get this on national agendas? How do we clarify and really emphasize the need for there to be active engagement in addressing the issue? And then very much so in the places where we work, but also here as well, I know it's true too, just resource constraints and trying to advocate for the allocation of resources in a way that allows for meaningful work to be done. Those are big challenges. And then there's also external challenges such as, I know Brittany mentioned COVID-19, but right as we were kind of starting programming and our research and in West Africa, the pandemic hit. And so that created an extra level of challenge there, and the time that it took to kind of recuperate across oceans from the pandemic. But then also in West Africa, where we've been working, I don't know how much you all maybe have been keeping up with the news, but it's also been a time of great instability with governments in the region, and it's become what has, been termed a coup epidemic of sorts happening in West Africa in particular. So even within the countries where we've worked, there's been an attempted coup, and then where there hasn't, there's been a very, challenging election where we were, there was months of uncertainty of how things would go and how democracy would be upheld. And so all of those things are great challenges, especially going back to the other, short list of challenges in terms of making this a priority. How do you emphasize the need for this when there's so many other macro level challenges happening? And so we've done a lot to try to address these issues. But then on a more micro level as well, thinking about our West Africa projects in particular, I know I already mentioned that in Sierra Leone, our focus has been on child trafficking. In Senegal, it's been on sex trafficking, particularly in a gold mining region of Senegal. And so with both of these issues, there's core cultural aspects that have come into play. For instance, in Sierra Leone, we have come to recognize that there is a long-standing cultural tradition of informal fostering, which goes by the term min pikin. And we came to realize that this is how a significant amount of trafficking was being facilitated, was through these informal fostering situations that weren't being necessarily documented or regulated, but were with the intention of children moving to be with family members or close friends. And so it was this difficult balance of we don't want to come in and discourage this long-standing cultural tradition that does have important value in a lot of circumstances, but how do we bring awareness to the ways that the tradition has also created the opportunity for this dynamic to be exploited and for children to end up in situations of trafficking? How do we raise awareness and navigate those relationships with a culturally attuned lens? And then similarly, but different in Senegal, the largest percentage, almost all in practice, of the victims that we have worked with during our time of programming in Senegal have actually been Nigerian victims. And so there's been multiple levels there too in terms of providing for their care and working with our implementing partner organizations of not only how are we culturally aware of what are the norms and kind of expectations from a Senegalese perspective, but also from a Nigerian perspective. And so with those that we're providing care for, how are we not only adapting to the culture of where they are currently located, but also the culture and norms of where the victims are from. And so one very practical way that we've gone about this is even just with our implementing partners there in Senegal, working with the Nigerian victims in a shelter, a huge improvement in their care that has actually seemed so small was just changing the way we provided food for them. Instead of having Senegalese meals cooked and prepared for them, it was more meaningful for them to be able to grocery shop, gather their own groceries and cook the meals that were what they were used to at home. And so it seems so small and so practical, but those trauma-informed approaches that are innovative and that require these longstanding relationships and this communication is really, at the heart of the work that we're doing, even though it seems like a small detail overall.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really important to be thinking about. And so you brought up, started talking about sort of this issue of some political will. How are we engaging different agencies? And I know, Brittany, you've been working a lot with sort of aligning government and non-governmental entities. And so I wonder if you could talk about some of the challenges and successes that you've had in collaboration and trying to bring both of them to the table to be able to really to implement effective collective impact.
Yeah, of course. So I think what's really fascinating, of course, in the nonprofit space is that we get told all the time that we need to be storytellers. We need to get donors with stories. And to Hope's point, then we get in this trap where it's like, well, at the end of the day, it's resource allocation, it's resource utilization, it's a business case for support. And I think where we have an opportunity to improve our partnerships, both whether that's public, private, or into the government through policymakers, is to make sure that we are not just doing the storytelling, which is extremely important, but that we're bringing alongside that the data and the business case for that. And so I know I've said it a lot, and I'm the data nerd. If you haven't gathered that, I love data. But the reason I love it is because it helps us quantify why we're asking for something and what is the impact of that investment. Compared to when we walk in to meet with philanthropists, they are already there wanting to give their donor dollars. So they're discerning, do they want to give it to this nonprofit or this nonprofit? But when we go in and we're talking with our policymakers, or we're asking corporations to invest into this issue, they are doing that from much more of a business lens. And so anytime that we can kind of bridge that world and help make sure that we are making that case for support goes a long way. And so that's really what we've worked to do in a lot of these communications with our policymakers or with private corporations. And part of the way that we've done that is through our Trafficking Survivor Equity Coalition, which is comprised of over 500 advocates, programs, task forces, to really unify what are the needs of the greater community. And so it's not just one organization going in there and saying, this is my need. It is showing that collectively, these are the barriers we're all facing across the communities. And therefore, we're asking you as our political representatives to help us move the needle intentionally in this direction. I think the other important thing that I would say on that as well is also putting our field through we put it through a pestle analysis in the book, understanding that sometimes they're not saying no, not because they don't care, because you haven't identified the root cause, done a root cause analysis to identify their barrier. And so you also have to understand what are those competing agendas that are coming at somebody that you need to answer for as part of your argument. And so I really think that we have an opportunity to maybe not step out of our lane, our area of responsibility, but to at least expand the aperture of what we're considering when we go into these conversations, so that we're going in equipped to really have meaningful dialogue with individuals about how they can enter in and be part of the solution. I guess my thing is I challenge each of us to really ask those 5 whys and get down to a root before you walk into a room, because then you're going to know exactly what it is that you're trying to get out of the individual you're meeting with.
And I think, coalitions, the more people that we can pull together behind some of these issues. And I think one of the beauties to coalitions is it really is foundational for collective impact, right? It gives different organizations an opportunity to really rally around something that they all agree in, and they can start to see, right, how much more impactful they can be when they come together. And so kind of shifting, we've talked about challenges, but now we're starting to talk about excuse me, successes, which is really, we want to end this on a happy note, to be able to say, this is the path forward. And so, Kirsty, when you're working in your role, you're seeing the impact of multi-systemic collaborations. You're seeing it play out, and dare say that you're seeing some successes. Could you share some of that with us? What are the positive impacts that you're laying witness to as you facilitate this?
Well, I think one of the maybe impacts that get lost, but for me, every time we have a coalition meeting, and there are over 65 people who are on the Zoom or in the room, people who maybe don't necessarily work with every day, maybe don't agree on everything, but they show up, right? So what have we done right? We have set a common agenda that people feel good about, that they agree with, and they're coming, they're showing up, right? First thing. Through that showing up, relationship building, we do have a coordinated response in our community. So the folks who do the work know who to go to, who serves survivors, who are my allies, what services can I get. So this important safety net that every community needs, this no wrong door for survivors. We know that there's a path forward for them, no matter where they enter or when they're arrested or recovered. There is a community response in place. So that's, I think, a huge victory that we have had in place in our community, and only can be done through collective impact, right? Law enforcement, social service organization, hospitals, all working in lockstep on this coordinated response. I think we've seen some great progress around data. I think when our data group start talking about data and getting a willingness, having a willingness of our partner to release their data, put it in a big pot and see what we got. That was huge. That was years, dare I say, a decade before we got our partners to say, okay, I see the common good for my data to be part of this larger data collection analysis. I see why that's important to me. So I think we're seeing these small victories in our community. I think we see a huge heightened level of awareness that has changed how we look at human trafficking, how we understand human trafficking, how people talk about it. I see buy-in from our county executive. I see buy-in from our local leadership that was sort of missing, but trickling down from the statewide and the federal level, which again, we're actively involved, bringing that awareness down and these tools that our statewide leaders and our federal leaders use. We've seen some tremendous policy changes. We just recently in Ohio had an expungement bill passed that we've been working on and have advocated for forever. And again, that takes multidisciplinary collaboration and tenacy and grit to get this passed. So I do think we've seen some great efforts. And then one other victory and I think huge win for us is that we have so many survivors involved in the work. I think everyone here on the call said survivor leaders are an important stakeholder group, and our survivor leadership circles are increasing more and more, and that strengthens us so much. And so we built them into all of our working groups, all of our activities, and it has made a huge impact. So I think those are some of the victories I would like to uplift.
Yeah, and Kirsty, you were talking a lot about just, this awareness, this understanding of the problem, and hope I heard that from you a little bit earlier, right, with kind of understanding within a cultural context some of the things that you're seeing. Hope, what could you share a success or where you've seen progress through collective impact in the regions you're working in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as I think I've mentioned, some along the way, but really we in each of the countries where we have been working, especially Sierra Leone and Senegal, for a longer period of time, we have been able to see across all levels of our connections there with all of our partners that I went through at the beginning, from our implementing partner organizations to government ministries to even, on a very broad scale, national policies. We have been able to see the research that we have conducted be used to inform and enhance approaches in a very evidence-based and empirically driven way. And so that raising the national awareness, raising regional awareness, as Kirsty mentioned, for her organization here in the US as well, that has really just been a huge highlight. We have continued to try to build on that in a multitude of innovative approaches as well, even connecting with local journalists too in the countries where we're working, to make sure that this information is not just reaching those individuals and in siloed spaces who are in places of government or who have come in direct contact with our services, but is also reaching the wider public as well. And so that's been a huge success. And now in Sierra Leone and Senegal, as our programming there in its current phase is kind of coming to an end, and we're conducting end-line research that is being, compared back to the baseline research. In both countries, we are just seeing significant improvements, both in terms of direct practice, but also in regard to prevalence as well. And that's been really, really encouraging. Those end-line reports will be out soon, and we're really excited to share that with everyone. But it's been really encouraging to see how taking this approach, doing the work of connecting on these multiple levels in order to prevent and eradicate trafficking has resulted in measurable change that can be seen in data, as we've discussed a lot on this call. So that's been really encouraging and really the biggest overarching success and what we set out to do. And it's been really, really important work, and work that we've been able to do through partnership with the U.S. Department of State, who have been wonderful partners through their Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons. So we're really excited to have those reports out soon.
I think we in the field are very excited to see those reports and start to look at, particularly, getting to that age-old question of prevalence, right? And really looking at how are we determining it through data collection. So I just want to kind of wrap up. I know we went a little bit over time, but this is such an awesome topic that I know we could just continue talking about for the rest of the afternoon. But I wanted to give you all just an opportunity. I very much appreciate the successes that we're seeing, right? And what you all are doing within your different organizations and agencies to really advance collective impact. But I think, again, we acknowledge there are challenges ahead, right? And so I want to ask you all, what is one specific challenge that if you had a magic wand that you could wave today and it kind of removes that particular challenge from the equation, what would that be, right? Because that's where we can start to focus some of our policy efforts, right, in removing that. So Brittany, I'm going to start with you. If you could wave that magic wand today, what would you get rid of?
I would want to wait for us to collect and aggregate data at a national and global scale that allows us to really be able to truly map prevalence, start really seeing what are effective interventions, and inform our solutions in a real way.
Awesome. Kirsty?
So glad you said that one. That would have been a hard one not to say. But for me, as a nonprofit backbone organization, it's really giving weight to the importance that backbone organizations play. We do not have standalone funding. There's no one out there that says, oh, I really want to fund your facilitating efforts. That needs to happen, Bill. We need to have that happen. HHS is pointing out in their reports, we need more organizations who stand up for us and say, no, we can't expect people to just do this on the side. This is really, really hard work. And we need to be acknowledged for doing this really, really hard work. And that needs to be funding attached to that really, really hard work. So in my magic wand world, there would be more funding for collective impact efforts like us here on the call.
Very fair. And hope.
Yes, I think my magic wand would probably be used to get back to this idea that I know has been consistent throughout the call of relationship building and the time that it takes for that. So if I could have a magic wand, it would be to be able to perfectly align timelines. If you could somehow, pause time and really be able to spend the endless amount of effort that it takes to really build strong relationships and then, resume and keep the objectives and progress moving. I think that's something we've really tried to prioritize in our work, but there is a limitation to that. And so building those relationships while actively engaging in the work is challenging, especially when there are limited timelines for funding or for whatever it may be, and there are set dates for needed outcomes and deliverables and such. All things that are good and are moving the process forward and are doing very critical work to eradicate human trafficking. But at the same time, if there could be ample time to do, the very extensive work of really focusing in on that relationship building, I think it would have an insurmountable effect on all of these ideas that we've talked about and how collective impact can really be carried out most successfully.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you to you three for sharing your expertise with us, to taking your time this afternoon, and of course, everyone that joined us to talk about this really important topic today. We hope that you'll join us next month. Our topic is going to be the Interstate Compact for the Protection of Children, which is a huge issue when we're providing restorative care services for youth across our country. You will be receiving a follow-up email with a link if you want to review the content of today, also with a survey. We really do value your opinion in thinking about other topics that might be helpful to you all out in the field. But again, Brittany, Kirsty, Hope, thank you so much for taking your time and sharing your expertise with us today. Hope everyone has a great day.